When LeBron James first came onto the national scene back when he was a junior in high school in 2002, you knew right away this kid was going to be something special. A phenom, a prodigy that only comes around once in a generation, and despite all the hype surrounding LeBron James going into the league as a teenager coming out of high school, being called the chosen one, the next Michael Jordan, he would go on to not only live up to the hype, but far and away exceed any expectations we ever had of him by becoming one of the greatest players to ever play the game. Some would even argue the greatest player of all time. And never in our wildest dreams back in 2003 when LeBron first entered the league would we expect for him to not only still be playing in 2025, but still playing at an elite level and still a star in the NBA. This level of longevity is something we have never seen in league history, but while LeBron's greatness continues even into his 40s, there is one thing that has been slightly tarnishing his legacy as he nears retirement, something some of the all-time greats of the past would have never done, and something that quite frankly is bad for the integrity of the game. What is that, you might ask? Well, let's talk about it. As always, if you're new to the channel and you enjoy this type of content, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribed, as we are nearing 100,000 subscribers. Let's see if we can get there before the end of the season. Now, when LeBron James fathered two sons, like any all-time great player, everybody always expects that those sons will follow in their father's footsteps and play basketball. Maybe not to the level of their dad, but being part of the game, basketball being a big part of their life, they're naturally going to develop that interest and passion. Not all the time, but most of the time. And while we've seen some instances of father-son duos where the son ultimately ends up being a better player than their dad, we have yet to see a scenario where some of the greatest players in NBA history have a son who meets or even surpasses their level of greatness. And while there have been some sons of former greats who were decent at the game and even played at a high school or college basketball level, it was clear they really weren't good enough to be in the NBA. And the dads accepted that, as getting to the NBA is something that should be earned and never just handed to you because of who your dad is. Michael Jordan's sons, Jeffrey and Marcus, were both good enough basketball players to make it to the collegiate level, both even playing for Division I schools, but it was clear in watching them play at the college level that they weren't good enough to even be starters in the NCAA and weren't even close to reaching the pinnacle of professional basketball and playing in the NBA. Now, because of who MJ was, the level of influence that he had, and his global recognition, he could have found a way easily to get his sons to be drafted and play in the NBA, even just for the viewership and ratings. But given what we know of Michael and the fierce competitor that he is, there wasn't a chance he was going to do that, knowing that his kids were not fit to be at that level and undermine the integrity of the game just for the sake of having his sons play in the NBA. LeBron James has been very different in that regard. Because while you could argue Bronny James has more or less been on the same level and wavelength of Jordan's sons in terms of their talent level and ability to impact winning at the high school and collegiate level, and even though we could see from a young age that Bronny was never going to be as good as his dad, or even be good enough to make it to the NBA, ever since the kid was 14 years old, it's always been a foregone conclusion that he would one day be in the NBA. And not only be in the NBA, but play alongside his father. Ever since he was a little kid, it was always the expectation, the pressure that this would be his destiny. And even when it started to become clear that he couldn't keep up with the competition, his dad pressed on and said that he will be drafted, going as far as to say he will go wherever he is drafted, and if a team really wants him, they will draft his son. When in reality, if Bronny didn't have the last name James, not one scout would have ever blinked an eye at this kid and thought that he belonged at the NBA level. LeBron would even go as far as to say that his son doesn't care about all the ratings, the mock drafts, his recruiting rank, and that he just hoops, works hard, and is always striving to get better, and that nothing is given to him, it is earned. Now, of course, we all know what happened. LeBron would manufacture a way for Bronny to be drafted by the Lakers with the 55th pick in the second round of the draft, with the Lakers brass threatening teams that if they draft Bronny, he will decline to play for them and go play in Australia. And even though some players drafted that late in the second round never end up making it to the NBA, and even a handful of players drafted before Bronny still haven't played a single NBA game or have since been waived by their team, Bronny, as a 55th pick, was able to land a 4-year, $7.9 million contract, something that is so rare for a second-round pick to receive before even starting their rookie season, as most sign 2-year deals where they have to earn and prove that they're worth a long-term NBA contract. And yes, of course, we got to see Bronny come in that very first game of the season to make history as the first father-son to ever play in an NBA game together. And yes, it made for great headlines. It was great for TV and ratings, and Bronny got his one rebound, but otherwise was a non-factor when he was on the court. It was the perfect manufactured spectacle, all to feed LeBron's ego. Now, don't get me wrong, I think LeBron is a great family man. He seems like an incredible father, and who am I to call out a dad who simply loves and supports his son? There is nothing wrong with that. But I think what people fail to realize, and perhaps even LeBron himself fails to realize, is that he has put his son in an impossible situation, a situation that his son probably didn't ask for. Faces enormous pressure and criticism because he clearly doesn't belong in the NBA, but at the same time, he also can't just quit because of what it means for LeBron James. LeBron has created an impossible situation for his son that really is not fair to him. And what's worse is you now have LeBron going toe-to-toe with the likes of Stephen A. Smith about how he needs to keep his son's name out of his mouth, as if his son should be free from any criticism as an NBA player. Like, dude, that comes with the territory. You should know that. When you're playing basketball at this level, getting paid millions of dollars, you're going to be critiqued. You're going to be viewed under a microscope. People are going to nitpick every little flaw to your game. Even if the criticism is valid or not, it comes with the territory. I get that he's standing up for his son, and that's commendable. Every father should. But you can't try and censor the media from talking about him. This is what you wanted. You wanted your son to play in the NBA, to play alongside you, even though deep down, you knew he did not belong. You knew he didn't belong at this level. I never thought I would say this, but I actually feel bad for Bronny James. I put out a video before Bronny was drafted talking about how he just isn't good enough to be in the NBA. And in that video, I poked holes in his game, I criticized his play and how he wasn't fit to be in the NBA, but that's 99.9% of the population. There isn't anything wrong with that. There isn't anything wrong with not being good enough to be in the NBA. So many kids of great basketball players never make it to the league, and that's okay. But his dad, LeBron, with his influence and status, forced this to happen when it shouldn't have. And because of it, Bronny is now the butt of every joke or meme where people are highlighting all of his lowlights or horrible stat lines, when in reality, had LeBron not pushed for this to happen, he would have just been like any other kid that was a decent basketball player but isn't good enough to be in the NBA. And he could have carried on with his life without everything that he does being under a microscope and open doors and fair game for ridicule. I really do feel for the kid, and LeBron, quite frankly, needs a reality check, because not only is he undermining the integrity of the game and setting a precedent that because of your last name, you can weasel your way into the NBA regardless of your skill level, but he's also made his son the laughingstock of the league. It didn't have to come to this, and I'm shocked no one in his camp, hell, even executives around the league, didn't try to have an honest conversation with LeBron and say, we should not do this. Now look, maybe Bronny can eventually get to a respectable level where he actually looks like he belongs on an NBA basketball court, as he has done decently well for himself in the G League, and I fully acknowledge that he's still young and every player develops and progresses at different rates, and to be honest, I hope that ends up being the case for Bronny. But as of right now, this is purely a case of nepotism at its finest, and it will be a blemish on LeBron's otherwise impeccable career and legacy. Just my take on the matter. I would love to hear what you guys think. You let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.